He was supposed to be off limits. My brother's dad. Charming, powerful, and always so perfectly composed. But the way his eyes lingered a little too long, the way my breath hitched when he was near, I knew we were dancing on the edge of something forbidden. I didn't want forever. I just wanted him to break the rules, just once. And when he did, my world shattered. Beautifully. This is my story and my secret. Tap the like button. Drop a comment telling me your favorite moment, and hit subscribe so you never miss another videos. I know I shouldn't have felt what I did, but feelings, those things don't really ask for permission, do they? They sneak in through cracks in your guard, and suddenly, before you know it, they bloom into something you can't quite control. That's exactly what happened to me with James Montgomery. James is my brother's dad, not mine. Technically my mom's ex-husband. They were never married for love. It was convenience, timing, life being messy. My brother William Grant and I have different dads, but we grew up under the same roof until their split. James was older, yes. Wiser, yes. But he was also tall, broad-shouldered, with these kind gray eyes that could unravel you with a glance. He was the kind of man who made you feel safe just by walking into the room. As a teenager, I used to think it was just a harmless crush, a phase, but it didn't go away, it deepened. Years passed. I moved out. College came and went. I thought I'd let the idea of James fade with the years. But then William got engaged. And guess who showed up again at all the planning dinners and house visits? James. He still had that same steady presence. His dark hair had a little more silver at the temples now, but it only made him more handsome. Like life had chiseled him into something even stronger. His laugh lines were deeper, but his voice still had that warmth I remembered. And something about the way he said my name, Elizabeth, made my skin hum. It started as glances across the room, fleeting eye contact that lingered just a second too long, small smiles when no one else was looking, nothing that would raise suspicion, nothing that could be called inappropriate. But it was there, underneath it all, this quiet current pulling us toward something neither of us dared name. One night, William invited a few close people to the lake house for the weekend. Just some pre-wedding relaxation. James was there, of course. We arrived late, well past sunset. I walked in carrying my bag, brushing off road dust, and there he was on the deck, shirt rolled up to his elbows, glass of something amber in hand, eyes lit by firelight. When he saw me, he stood. "Elizabeth," he said in that voice, low and velvety, like he hadn't seen me in years instead of weeks. "Hey," I breathed, heat crawling up my neck. The weekend passed in a blur of drinks, laughs, and half-buried tension. Everyone else seemed oblivious to the silent pull between us. One night I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but my head buzzed with thoughts I couldn't shake. I tiptoed down to the kitchen, hoping tea would help. But I wasn't the only one awake. James sat at the kitchen table in flannel pajama pants and a faded gray tee, reading on his phone. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, glancing up. I shook my head and whispered, "Too quiet." He smiled, that soft kind that always curled at just one side of his lips. "Want some tea?" I nodded. He stood, reaching for the kettle, and I watched the muscles in his back move under his shirt. Everything about him was so effortlessly masculine, grounded. And then it happened. His hand brushed mine as he handed me the mug. I felt it straight through me. Neither of us pulled away immediately. "I remember when you were just a kid," he said softly, "running barefoot through the sprinklers, always asking me to carry you on my shoulders." "I'm not a kid anymore," I replied, voice steadier than I felt. His eyes searched mine. "No, you're not." It was reckless, dangerous, but I stepped a little closer, just enough to test the air between us. "Have you ever wanted something you shouldn't?" I asked. James exhaled slowly. "More than once." My heart thundered. I wanted him to break the rules, just once, just one moment, just for me. He closed his eyes for a second, and when they opened again, They were full of something I didn't expect. Desire, restraint, and something almost tender. "Elizabeth, I can't." "But you want to." Silence. Then a nod. "Everyone's asleep," I whispered. "I know." And still we didn't move. Or maybe we did, just not in the way people expected. We stood there in the dim kitchen light, so close that I could smell his skin, clean, warm, like cedar wood and something distinctly him. "I think about you," I admitted. "Don't," he said, voice thick. "It'll make this harder." "I want it to be hard," I said before I could stop myself, eyes locking with his. He chuckled then, a low, husky sound that made my knees weak. "You don't make things easy, Elizabeth." "Neither do you." The kettle whistled softly behind us, but we didn't move. James's hand hovered at my waist, but didn't touch. My heart begged him to, just once, but he stepped back. "You're incredible," he said, "but I can't. Not here. Not like this." And with that he walked away. The next morning was normal. Pretend normal. He poured my coffee. We laughed about card games. But underneath, I could feel something had shifted. Days passed, then weeks, until one afternoon a letter came. No name, just a note, typed, clipped to a book I'd once mentioned loving. Some rules aren't broken with noise, but with silence and longing. You were always unforgettable. No signature, but I knew. The next time I saw James, it was at William's wedding. I wore a satin green dress that hugged me in all the right places. James saw me from across the lawn and froze, just for a second, before resuming his usual calm. We talked politely, nothing more. But when the music started and people flooded the dance floor, he found me. "May I?" He held out his hand. I nodded and let him lead. It wasn't a dance, it was a story. His hand on my waist, mine on his shoulder. Our bodies moved in rhythm, like they knew things our mouths weren't allowed to say. And for that one song he broke the rules, with every touch, every glance, every breath against my cheek. That night we didn't need to speak. It was all there, written in the way his hand lingered, just a second longer as he said goodbye. The way his fingers brushed mine with aching care. Nothing happened, but everything did. Because sometimes the sexiest stories aren't the ones that go all the way. Sometimes it's the almost, the waiting, the what-ifs, the breath between two hearts not brave enough to beat as one. And maybe that's the real fire, the kind that smolders in silence and sparks only when no one's looking. I still think of James. I still feel the gravity of that night. And though he never broke the rules completely, just once he bent them for me. And I will never forget the way that felt. It was later that same night. Everyone had settled into their rooms after dinner, laughter fading into sleepy silence. I couldn't sleep. My head was buzzing, like his presence had stirred something I hadn't let myself feel in years. I slipped on one of those oversized, off-the-shoulder sleep shirts and padded quietly downstairs. I thought I was alone until I turned the corner and saw him. James Montgomery, sitting in the kitchen, bathed in warm light from the pendant above the sink, a mug in one hand, reading glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up when he heard me. "Can't sleep either?" His voice was low, intimate. I shook my head and tried to smile. "Too quiet. My brain doesn't like quiet." He chuckled softly and pushed the chair out beside him. "Come sit." I didn't hesitate. I curled up beside him, hugging my knees, aware that my bare shoulder brushed the edge of his sleeve. The air between us wasn't cold, but I shivered anyway. He noticed. "You okay?" he asked, glancing over at me with concern. I nodded. "Just a weird kind of night." His eyes lingered. "You've grown into something extraordinary, Elizabeth." I didn't speak. I couldn't. That voice, those words. I'd dreamed of him saying something like that, but hearing it, my chest ached. "James," I whispered, daring to say his name slowly, softly, just to taste the way it felt on my tongue again. He set the mug down, and for the first time he didn't look away. His gaze dropped from my eyes to my lips and back again. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, in my toes, everywhere. If I say the wrong thing, he said, I won't be able to take it back. Then say it, I whispered, because I already know. That silence between us said more than 100 words ever could. It was loaded, suspended. His hand rested on the table, just inches from mine. I saw the way his fingers twitched, like they wanted to move, toward me, into me, but he held himself still. I shouldn't feel what I feel, he murmured. But you do. He didn't deny it. I leaned in just enough for my shoulder to press against his arm. I could feel the heat of his skin through his shirt, and I swore I heard his breath hitch. If we were different people, I said. If this were a different time. James exhaled. I'd kiss you. Would you? I asked, locking eyes with him. In a heartbeat, he said. The room was spinning slowly in silence. His hand moved closer, fingers brushing mine. Not holding. Not yet. Just brushing. The kind of touch you don't forget. But then he pulled away just slightly. Elizabeth, he said, voice rough and trembling. You deserve someone who isn't tangled in your past. I leaned back only because I had to. My heart wasn't ready to let go, but my mind knew this wasn't the moment. I'm not asking for forever, I whispered. I'm just asking if you feel it too. He stood up then, slowly, careful not to look at me too long. I do, he said. Too much. And then he left the kitchen, disappearing into the hallway like it took everything in him to walk away. I sat there alone, heart pounding, skin still tingling from the nearness of him. The things he didn't say were louder than the ones he did, and I knew then this was far from over. He hadn't broken the rules. Not yet, but the line between us had already begun to fade. The next morning, everything felt louder, brighter, like the house had woken up, but I hadn't fully returned from the quiet spell he'd cast on me. I avoided James at breakfast, or at least I tried, but it was impossible not to feel him watching me as I stirred creamer into my coffee. His presence felt like the pull of the tide, steady, constant, impossible to ignore even when it wasn't crashing down. He didn't say a word about the night before. Neither did I, but our eyes met, and in that single glance, I knew he hadn't slept much either. The day passed in a haze of lakeside sunshine and casual family chatter. William and his fiancée, Grace, wanted to play lawn games. Everyone laughed, taking turns at cornhole and badminton. But I wasn't really there. Not fully, because every time James passed behind me or brushed past me on the deck, my skin lit up like a live wire. Later that afternoon, while everyone else was out on the pontoon boat, I stayed behind. I claimed a headache, but the truth was I couldn't take being around him without falling apart. I walked out to the end of the dock, dipped my toes into the cool water, and tried to breathe. But then I heard the soft crunch of footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. Headache, huh? James's voice drifted toward me, quieter now, like the breeze had smoothed its edges. I smiled without looking back. That obvious. You never did like lying, he said. I turned then, slowly, and saw him standing just a few steps behind. He ditched his usual button-down for a plain navy t-shirt that clung slightly to his chest. He looked so casual, so effortless it hurt. Needed space, I said honestly. From everything. James nodded and looked out over the water. I get it. I stood and walked toward him until there was barely a foot of distance between us. The tension was unbearable. I haven't stopped thinking about last night, I whispered. His eyes flicked to mine. Neither have I. So, what do we do? He was quiet for a long moment. Everything in me is telling me to do the right thing, he said, voice low. But the wrong thing has never felt this right. His confession hit me like a storm. Then do it, I breathed. Just once. A beat of silence. And then he stepped forward, so close I could feel the heat of him, the faint scent of his skin, like cedarwood and firelight. But he didn't touch me. Instead, he raised his hand slowly, like he was asking for permission with every movement, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingertips grazed my temple. I closed my eyes. My breath caught. He leaned in, not to kiss me, no. That would have crossed the line. But his forehead touched mine. His nose brushed my cheek. And we just stood there, suspended, bound by everything we weren't saying, by everything we wanted but couldn't take. "Elizabeth," he whispered against my skin, "if I kiss you, I won't stop." I opened my eyes and looked straight into his. "Then don't stop." His lips parted. His hand brushed my waist. I could feel his breath on my mouth. I wanted him to lean in, to break the rule, just one moment. But the sound of a boat horn in the distance snapped us apart. Voices and laughter echoed across the water. We stepped back, like someone had yanked us out of a dream. He cleared his throat. I smoothed my hair. Neither of us said a word as we turned back toward the house. But everything between us had changed. The line had been drawn, and we were dancing on the edge of it, barefoot and burning. That night, the lake house was quieter than usual. Dinner had come and gone. Dishes were stacked in the sink, and most of the others had retreated to the living room to play cards and argue over music. I drifted through it all like a ghost, present, smiling, nodding, but I wasn't really there. I kept catching glimpses of James Montgomery, seated by the window, legs crossed, eyes sometimes on his phone, but more often on me. He was doing what he always did, trying to keep distance that didn't really exist. But I knew better now. Later, after everyone had turned in, and the only light was the soft yellow glow from the hallway lamp, I wandered upstairs toward my room. As I passed the guest bedroom, the one at the end of the hall, his door cracked open, and there he stood. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. We just looked at each other. The hallway was still, the only sound a soft creak of the old floorboards beneath my bare feet. I took one step closer, then another. His hand moved slightly on the doorframe, like he wanted to reach for me, but couldn't allow himself to. "I can't sleep again," I whispered. He exhaled. "Neither can I." For a moment, we just stood there in the tension of our shared quiet. The hallway light framed his face, making him look older, wiser, and still the most magnetic man I'd ever known. "Do you want to come in?" he asked, barely audible. My heart skipped. I knew what he meant, and what he didn't. He wasn't inviting me to do anything reckless. He was inviting me into the space where we could just be. No pretending. No watching each other across rooms full of people. Just us. I nodded and stepped inside. His room smelled like him. Clean, warm, like fresh sheets and cedar and something deeper I couldn't name. He didn't close the door all the way. He left it slightly ajar, as if that tiny gap between us and the rest of the house made it somehow less dangerous. I sat on the edge of the bed. He sat beside me. The mattress barely dipped beneath our weight, but I could feel the energy between our knees. "Do you regret it?" I asked softly, wanting me. James turned his head slowly toward me. "I regret the timing, not the feeling." That answer nearly undid me. I looked down at my hands, twisting them together in my lap. "I don't want you to protect me from this," I said. He let out a slow breath. "I'm not protecting you. I'm protecting both of us from the damage this could do." I met his eyes again, but sometimes even the damage is worth it. His hand came to rest gently, so gently on my knee. Not moving, not pushing, just there. And it was everything. My whole body responded to that single point of contact. "Elizabeth," he said, voice barely there, "you don't know how many times I've almost kissed you." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I wouldn't have stopped at just one." Silence wrapped around us like velvet, and then his thumb moved, the tiniest circle on the side of my knee. I didn't even know something that small could feel that intense. "I should go," I whispered, not meaning it. "I should let you," he whispered back, not meaning it either. We both stayed. His forehead touched mine again, his breath warm against my skin. I could feel the hesitation in him and the want. They were battling each other right there in the space between us. I closed my eyes and waited. But again, he didn't cross the line. Not yet. Instead, he pressed the gentlest, slowest kiss to my temple. Reverent. Long. Like he was memorizing the feel of me without actually taking anything. "I'm going to remember this," he said, his lips brushing my skin. "So will I." I stood, shaking from the inside out, and turned toward the door. Neither of us said goodbye, because we both knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something that was still holding its breath, something we hadn't let happen yet. The next morning, I left his room without saying a word. I hadn't slept. Not really. I'd laid in my own bed staring at the ceiling, feeling every ghost of his breath on my skin. By breakfast, James was back to his usual calm, reading the paper on the deck, speaking quietly when spoken to, like nothing had happened, but everything had. The silence between us now was too thick, too charged to ignore. Every time our eyes met, it was like lightning in slow motion, powerful, dangerous, beautiful. By late afternoon, gray clouds gathered over the lake. A soft thunder rolled in the distance, and the sky dimmed. Most of the others decided to head into town for a late lunch before the rain hit. I stayed behind again, and so did James. He found me in the screened-in porch. I sat curled in the corner with a book in my lap, pretending to read. But my eyes hadn't moved from the same page for nearly half an hour. "You always like storms?" he asked from the doorway. I looked up. "I like what they reveal." He raised a brow and stepped inside. "And what's that?" "Who runs and who stays?" He paused, then walked toward me. "I never ran from you, Elizabeth," he said, sitting across from me. "I was trying not to fall." My breath caught. "You already did," I said. The storm began to break open around us. Raindrops pelted the roof. Wind rattled the screens. But inside, everything went still. James leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I thought I could handle this. I thought I could keep you at a distance. And now—" He looked right at me. No hesitation this time. "Now, every time I see you, I feel like I'm fighting gravity." I stood slowly, walked across the small space, and sat beside him on the couch. Close enough to feel the shift in his breathing. He looked down at my hands resting in my lap. "Don't you want to know what it would feel like?" I asked. He didn't answer. So I lifted his hand gently, placed it against my cheek, and closed my eyes. "I'm not asking you to promise me anything," I said. "Just stop pretending you don't feel it." His fingers moved slowly, softly, tracing the edge of my jaw. "You're too young for me," he whispered, eyes still fixed on my face. "I'm not a girl anymore," I said, "and I know the difference between being wanted and being loved." His hand dropped to my thigh, light, careful, hesitant, but it was there. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely think. But I wasn't afraid. Not of him. Not of this. "I've tried to be good," he said, voice low and breaking. "But I'm not strong around you, Elizabeth." "Then stop trying to be strong," I whispered. "Just be honest." And then it happened. His hand slid behind my neck. His fingers buried themselves gently in my hair. And when he leaned in, I thought I might stop breathing altogether. But he didn't kiss me. Instead, his lips hovered just above mine, his breath warm, his eyes locked with mine. "Tell me to stop," he said. "I won't," I breathed. His lips touched mine, soft, slow, and almost uncertain. But the second we connected, it was like everything else disappeared. The storm outside, the rules we'd been following, the world we'd tried to stay inside, it all melted away. He kissed me like I was something sacred and dangerous at once. And I kissed him back like I'd been waiting for this my whole life. We didn't go further. We didn't need to. That kiss was enough to set fire to everything we'd kept buried. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathless. "I shouldn't have," he said quietly. "But you did," I whispered. He looked at me, guilt and need tangled in his expression. "I'm not sorry," I said. He rested his forehead against mine again. Neither of us moved, because in that moment, even with the rain crashing down around us, even with everything wrong about it, we were exactly where we were meant to be. After the kiss, everything felt different. Not just between us, but inside me. He touched something in me that no one had ever reached. And I knew, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't go back to pretending it didn't mean something. That evening, we didn't speak of it again. We sat side by side in the porch, the storm dying down into soft drops. He brushed my hand once with his fingers and then pulled away. But that quiet electricity stayed between us, humming louder than any words. The next morning, he avoided me, not cruelly, just distant, like he'd closed some door again, and that hurt more than I expected. I tried not to let it show. I laughed with my brother. I went down to the dock with the others. I floated in the lake, stared at the sky, and wondered what it would be like if he had the courage to love me out loud. But by sunset, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I found him alone in the boathouse, checking the motor of the speedboat like it was urgent, even though we weren't going anywhere. "You kissed me," I said from the doorway. He paused. His back stayed turned. "And then you ran," I added. He let out a long breath. I didn't run. I stepped inside, closing the wooden door behind me. "Then what do you call this?" He turned slowly. His eyes were tired, full of something he hadn't said yet. "I'm scared," he said. Those words, honest, raw, real, disarmed me. "Of what?" I asked quieter. "Of what people will think. Of hurting your brother. Of being seen as someone who crossed the line." I nodded, understanding more than he knew. "But what about what you feel? Does that matter to you?" He stepped closer. "It matters more than I wanted to," he said. My voice shook when I whispered, "Then stop hiding from it." His eyes held mine for a long moment. Then, without another word, he walked over, took my face gently in his hands, and kissed me again. This time it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't fearful. It was deep, confessing everything he hadn't said. His hands slid into my hair. My fingers wrapped around his shirt, holding on like I'd fall without him. The world faded again. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead on his chest. I could feel his heartbeat. It was racing like mine. "This us, it's not wrong," I whispered. "It's just unexpected." "I've never wanted anything more," he breathed. "But I need to do it right." I looked up at him. "Then do," I said. "Whatever right looks like to you. I'm not going anywhere." He kissed my forehead, held me tighter, and I felt something shift inside him. The fear melted, just enough to let love peek through. 2 weeks later, we were back in the city. Life returned to its usual rhythm, but something had changed. He didn't keep me hidden. He didn't make excuses. James came to see me at my small apartment. We took walks. We talked late into the night. We laughed. We touched. We kissed. And always it felt like we were rediscovering each other all over again. One night he looked at me across my kitchen table and said, "You know, you scared me." I smiled. "Good. I was terrified too." He reached for my hand. "But I'd rather risk everything with you than spend the rest of my life wondering, what if?" My heart melted. Right then, I knew. This wasn't just a summer attraction. This was something real. Something that defied logic, timelines, and rules. Now it's been months. People eventually found out. Some were shocked. Some judged. Some stayed silent. But the ones who mattered, they saw the truth. They saw how I smiled when he entered a room. How he looked at me like I was his beginning and his end. He wasn't just my brother's dad anymore. He was James Montgomery, the man I fell in love with when I least expected it. And me? I was the girl who asked him to break the rules just once. And I'm so glad he did. Because in that one broken rule, we found something whole. Something worth everything.